Welcome to the next episode of the Austin Bar Association's Council of Firsts. I'm your host, Amanda Arriaga, First Latina Bar President. This podcast is made possible by the Texas Bar Foundation. Today, I am so pleased to introduce you to Pamela Giblin, first female attorney to win the Distinguished Lawyer Award from the Austin Bar Foundation. Pam is a graduate of the University of Texas School of Law and has been a trailblazer for her entire career. She is widely credited for shaping the environmental laws for Texas and the nation. Pam is the former general counsel of the Texas Air Control Board. She's been recognized as one of the best lawyers in America from 1989 to 2014 and a Texas super lawyer for 10 consecutive years. She has served on the EPA's Clean Air Act Advisory Committee and is a past president of the American College of Environmental Lawyers. Pam has always been active in the community, serving on the Seton Family of Hospitals Board of Directors, Seton Fund Board of Directors, the Board of Mexic Arte Museum, and the advisory board of the Teresa Lozano Long Institute of Latin American Studies. I am so happy for you to get to know Pam Giblin. Thank you for being here today.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
I want to start at the beginning and ask, why did you want to be a lawyer?
I was originally headed to medical school, and then I met the man who became my husband later, and he was in law school in Austin. And he said to me, why would you want to be a doctor when you could be a lawyer? Again, he had an ulterior motive because he wanted me to move to Austin because they didn't have a medical school at the time. So I switched and I went to law school, and I thought I had died and gone to heaven because it really clicked with me.
And you were at UT Law in 1970, where you were one of 8 women in your class. Did you get the sense that the women were expected to work harder, or did it seem like a normal balance between the men and the women?
It wasn't as rough as people describe it in retrospect. I mean, there were a few of us. In a way, it was an advantage. We were sort of the exotic birds. And it was, in some respects, easier. But, I didn't get any kind of sense that, oh, my gosh, this is so much more difficult for women.
And you are widely thought of to have shaped the environmental laws that we have in Texas and the United States. How did you pick the specialty of environmental law?
It picked me, okay? They didn't teach environmental law when I was in law school. I graduated in 1970, and so in the 67 to 70, when I was there, they didn't teach it. I got out of law school, and again, the man who later became my husband, who was working for the Attorney General's office, wanted me to stay in Austin, and he said there is an opening for a lawyer at the Texas Air Control Board. I had never heard of the Texas Air Control Board. It was the agency that had just been created to basically shape air law in Texas. So I go there, I interview, and I get the job. And so it was just one of those wonderful situations that I'm a huge believer that we need to be receptive to things that come our way. That if you really try to plan your career, it almost never works out. And so you just need to be able to leap on an opportunity. And so that was an opportunity. So I got that first job and then went on from there.
Well, and it's so funny because you're so humble when you describe yourself and you give a lot of credit to your husband. But if we were to Google you, which I have done, there are a ton of articles that come out about how you were the most successful lobbyist in Texas for many years. You were named one of the best lawyers in America in the environmental law section for 25 years. So how do you credit this great success that you've had?
I think being in on the ground floor of something, 1970, when I got out of law school and went to work for the Texas Air Control Board, was the year that the Federal Clean Air Act passed. So my first job, get this, was to write the rules to implement the Federal Clean Air Act in Texas. You couldn't get paid to do something so exciting. And in fact, my mother sent me a letter where I had described that. I said, I can't believe I'm being paid to do this. So a lot of it really is being at an opportune moment. And so I was able to get in on the ground floor. And so what was interesting is that had I been, let's say, in admiralty law, and I was up against lawyers who had been doing admiralty law for 50, 60 years. But in environmental, there wasn't anybody that had been doing it longer than I had because it was new. And so being in on the ground floor was a remarkable opportunity to do something and to be there and, again, shape it.
You did a lot for the environment. And then when we talked at lunch, you talked about how you also were able to go and do the same at the federal level, and you were invited because you had done this in Texas. And then later, some of the articles talked about how your job was to support polluters. Did it ever bother you that what you were working on sort of got twisted into a negative thing?
No, not really, because I knew what I was doing and I was trying to help industry do it right. And so I was very comfortable. I mean, I was very blunt with clients that wanted to hire me that, okay, you want to do it right, I'm your girl. If you don't, go find somebody else. And so one of the things about a complicated regulatory system like environmental is that there are ways to do it and there are ways not to do it. And so it was a fascinating challenge for me. I'm a big believer that you can have clean industry, but you need to be very firm with your clients about what that means.
So in 2003, you became the first female to win the Distinguished Lawyer Award from the Austin Bar Association. I think then it was still the Travis County Bar Association. How were you celebrated?
Well, we had a luncheon, and there were a lot of people that came and that sort of thing. And it was, again, I probably underestimated what it meant. I mean, they called me up and they said, you're getting this award, and I was thrilled. But again, it wasn't, some hoopla. I mean, I don't think the average person in Austin knew anything about it.
Well, I would think it's probably meaningful that not only were you the first female, but you also had this role that was sort of a hybrid at the courthouse and at the Capitol.
Right. I mean, and that's a good point, because I did a lot of litigation early in my career, but then over time, I did more of the regulatory work, which is persuading regulatory agencies or the Capitol on a lot of environmental law is played out not in the courthouse. And so you're right that it was a hybrid, because most of the recipients of this award had been pretty much litigator.
Yeah, I just think that they must have kept reading your name in the paper and thinking like, gosh, who is this Pam? And what are all of the exciting things that she's doing?
Well, again, I was very fortunate to be in a cutting edge area of the law. I think that, environmental law was just coming into its own. People didn't know much about it. And having been on the ground floor gave me that opportunity.
So it's my understanding after you become a distinguished lawyer, you get to help determine who the next distinguished lawyers are. Is it important to you to keep picking women or minorities for this award, or people in non-traditional legal paths?
I think you look at all of those things. I don't think you want it to be just, one or the other. In other words, they need to be qualified lawyers, really good lawyers, distinguished lawyers. And to the extent that we can have women, as you can see from the list, we've had a lot more women that have joined the ranks. We've had minority lawyers. But the key thing is, what is it about their practice that qualifies them for this?
What organizations have meant the most to you professionally or personally?
I really enjoyed my time with the Clean Air Act Advisory Committee. It's a federal committee that was created after the 1990 amendments to the Federal Clean Air Act to help shape EPA's interpretation of environmental laws, primarily on the air side, which is my subspecialty. And so that was fascinating because we had people from all over the country, very diverse points of view, very diverse backgrounds, and it was an opportunity to really shape federal policy. And so that was a very interesting service.
What advice do you have for anyone who wants to follow in your footsteps?
I think one of the key things, two pieces of advice, is I'm a big believer in authenticity. Figure out what you do really well. Don't try to shape yourself. Don't try to say, okay, how do I adapt to this particular law firm or agency or whatever? So authenticity. Who are you? What are your strengths? And then the other thing is, as I mentioned, be open to opportunities that you didn't envision. I'm amazed at some of these young kids out of law school who want to plot their whole career path. You're just thinking, no, you're going to miss opportunities. And then going back to the first thing about authenticity, they want to adapt their style and miss sort of understanding what they do really well. I've always believed there are things that all of us can do in our sleep, that we can do with a slight stretch, and that we can do with a gun to our head. And there's nothing better than finding a career path where you're working on the first, where things that come easily to you. And some people think, well, heck, that's easy, that's lazy. You should really try to go for things that are very difficult for you. But if you're working on things that you love, that come easily to you, you'll, as I said, you'll wonder why you get paid to do this. And so I think a lot of people, I was at a UT Law conference the other day, and a lot of these young law students, especially women, were saying, okay, how do we sell ourselves to this market, and how do I adapt to that? And I tried to stress to them again this point of just figure out what you do really well, and that's what you're selling. That's what's marketable in the best way possible, because you'll be happy. And I know it sounds corny, but if you don't enjoy what you're doing, none of the compensation is going to matter. And so there are certain things that are not negotiable, like punctuality. If you're one of those people that your natural authenticity is that you like to sleep till noon, you're probably going to have to adapt to a different hourly schedule. But there's still so much room for you to incorporate those things that come naturally to you that you will really be good at. And if you tap into those, there's no stopping you in your career.
Well, and it's funny you mention visiting with law students. I also talked to someone else recently, and there was a panel of us, and they were asking, how did we choose our current career path? Are we happy? And that was sort of the premise. And then some of the specific questions were things like, do you prefer Westlaw or LexisNexis, and why? And we all started laughing and said, no, that's not what we do day to day. And I had a question from a little 1L that asked, I want to go to a law firm. How do I gain confidence? And how do I show them that I am confident? And I thought, well, my answer was, well, based on your premise, you're a lawyer in that law firm. So be confident, because you're exactly where you want to go. But I think it was interesting because they were trying to figure out, my first step was law school. How exactly do I get the next step? Well, heck, we all have a different way that we got to where we were. But I agree with you that if you are happy and you like the topic and the subject area, that will always help. Because at least for me, trying to contort myself into something that I don't like and putting on a show has never worked.
Absolutely. I cannot agree more. It just is fascinating to me that people that try to figure out what's the next hot area, and it's a boring area, and they're going to contort themselves. And so I'm like, no, find what you're really good at and then nail it. And then that'll come across in the interviews with law firms, in the interviews with clients when they're trying to figure out who to hire. That authenticity, like, you can't fake authenticity.
Well, and it's interesting that your career, according to you, is sort of based on being the front line of an emerging sector. And people actually have the opportunity to do that too. There are emerging sectors all the time. Space is new. Everything with AI is new. So coming up, because I wonder for some people to translate, but how do I find it? Civil litigation exists. Yeah, but there's always a new topic, and there's always something new brewing. And so to be on the front line of something new is exciting.
Yeah, and even in older areas, let's say that the area is not new or the topic is not new, you might bring something to it that's different or unique. We all have our experiences. I mean, I was very lucky when I was 6 weeks old, we moved to Latin America. I speak better Spanish than English. That came in very handy in a lot of areas of my practice. So there will always be something in your background that you can tap into, even in these older areas of law. I mean, litigation, for example. Connecting with a jury is so much about situational awareness, being able to read the room. I really enjoyed litigation, which I did early in my career in the environmental area. But it wasn't so much just because I knew the environmental area. It's because you could read the jury, read the room. And I think women have some advantage in that. I'm not trying to be sexist here, but I think that situational awareness is something that we underestimate, and it's important.
And that situational awareness is the same at the state capitol. To know when you've lost, to know when you should stop talking, to know that just being the smartest person in the room doesn't actually help your cause very much. So no matter talking to a state agency, no matter who you're talking to, that nuance of being able to read the room is always important.
Right, because at bottom line, being a lawyer is persuasion, okay? You're trying to persuade somebody, be it a judge, be it a jury, be it an agency, be it a legislator, whatever. That's what it's all about. And to persuade somebody, you've got to understand that person. I mean, what may persuade me might not persuade you, and so you're trying to really understand the person you're trying to persuade. And to me, that doesn't seem very difficult, but I'm fascinated by people who have their talking points and they walk into a room, and I've been in many of these meetings where you're just wanting to, well, ixnay, get them to stop because they're just going on and it's not connecting with the people that they're trying to persuade. Because, as I said, at the end of the day, it's all about persuasion. Like, we're all following all that's going on in Washington with the Trump stuff. And, with juries, you've got to be able to read those jurors, the body language, the facial expressions, et cetera, et cetera.
You say persuasion because you are classier than me. I always describe that what I do is fancy talking, but it's the same idea. Is my job is to get you to agree with what I need you to agree with so that it helps my clients.
And again, a lot of it comes back to knowing your own particular style. I've negotiated a lot of very difficult cases where there was a lot at stake. And one thing that a lawyer that I've been on the other side of for many years, he's just precious. I really like him. He was talking about that I always kind of went to my bottom line. I wasn't one of these negotiators like you see a lot of folks that want to start really low and then you're going to haggle me up here. I would start basically saying, okay, here's where we can go. Here's where we cannot go. And I pretty much never moved. And that's kind of an interesting style, but it worked for me. So you just have to find your style of negotiation. Because, again, when you're doing the legislative or the courtroom, you're not really negotiating. But if you're sitting across the table from the lawyer on the other side, you do need to feel comfortable with your negotiation style. And I had mine, which, again, I was very sort of bottom line. We're not going to haggle and you're going to, then get me to some other number. This is it, guy. And do it in a really nice way and have it be genuine. Don't have it be like, oh, I've got all this other stuff that I could deliver. And again, that's part of that authenticity. As you get older, you really learn your skills, what you do well, what you don't do well.
Well, it's funny because I think that there is a misperception that you can't be direct and be polite. And it's just as nice to be able to say, this is the answer. I'm sorry, this is what we need to do. We can't move from that. And there's nothing wrong with being that level of direct.
Yeah. And again, a lot of it is, like you said, presentation style. For example, in the environmental area, one of the things that a lot of environmental groups wanted was buyouts where you'd buy out this entire neighborhood and move them, okay? I hated that because you would always then hack off the people that were at the cutoff line who didn't get bought. And it was a slippery slope. So everybody with whom I negotiated over the years knew I wasn't going with buyouts, okay? And I was very, very upfront because you don't want to mislead somebody. You don't want them to think that I could go there or my client could go there and then you pull out the rug. So if you early on set the expectations, but what I would say is, here's what we can do. And I had a menu of things that would work to make the community feel more comfortable about this fossil fuel plant that was going to go into their neighborhood. But buyouts, I didn't want to get them, I didn't want to raise expectations that we would go there and then we can't go there because virtually never did those buyouts work.
Do you have anything else that you would like to say to our audience?
No, other than I'm a huge believer that there's no profession like law. It will prepare you to do pretty much anything you want to do. You can either practice with a firm, with a corporation, with government. It is the most flexible profession in the world. So I'm evangelical about encouraging people, especially women, to go into it because there's nothing you cannot do with a law degree.
That's wonderful. And I've always thought having a law degree gives instant credibility, especially at the Capitol. There are general counsels of legislative offices that are right out of law school because there is this theory that if you went to law school and you graduated and you passed the bar, you must know something. So there is instant credibility to be a lawyer, no matter what you end up deciding that you want to practice.
Right, because what it teaches you is not some subject area. It teaches you how to analyze, how to organize arguments, how to persuade. I mean, when you look at the building blocks of a law education, it's not, oh, I learned corporate law or property law or whatever. It's the mental process that they educated us on. And those you can use anywhere. And so I am totally a proponent that you need to think about law.
Well, you heard Pam. Go to law school if you're thinking about it. Even if you don't end up wanting to be a lawyer, go to law school.
Exactly.
Thank you for being with us today, Pam. I have loved this, and I think the audience will love it too.
Well, hopefully.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.